It's yours.
Thanks a lot. Very nice to be here. Very nice to present. So today I want to share a bit of the experience that we had as Airfix um, trying to secure storage capacity. So going to look at it also more from a commercial side and also from the emitter point of view, particularly looking at small and medium-sized emitters. So biogas plants, waste to energy plants, and focusing also specifically on biogenic CO2 emitters that we work mostly with. Um, Very briefly about Airfix, and it's not exactly how it's supposed to look like, but so we do three things. We really focus on developing biomass carbon capture and storage. So bio-CCS, BECCS, bikers. There are different terms out there, but basically it's about capturing biogenic CO2 and putting it on the ground. So we support with advisory services to help projects get off the ground, help them understand a bit their economic and technical feasibility. We help them to secure transport and storage services and try to work as an aggregator. So taking several emitters in the same area and aggregating the transport and storage needs. And then on the final side, on the MRV, so monitoring, reporting, and verification of the entire value chain, and then which leads to a negative emission certificate, which then we sell on the voluntary carbon market. So that entire value chain is what is needed for a bio-CCS project to be viable and to basically find a taker. At the moment, we have 6 projects in Europe that we work with on different parts of the value chain. One in Switzerland, a little cluster of 3 in France, and 2 in the Netherlands. All of them are biomethane, so they have the advantage of already splitting the CO2 from the methane, so very low capture costs, and because you have basically a pure stream of CO2. In total, those 6 projects will capture in 2026 around 30 to 40,000 tons per year. The lead time is quite short as well, as I mentioned. It's basically only liquefaction unit that needs to be implemented. Transport uses existing assets of truck and rail, but the transport is the largest cost of the value chain since the CO2 has to be brought all the way up to the North Sea. And of course, we're here the big numbers have been king and queen, I would say, all talking about megatons, gigatons, etc. Here, 30, 40,000 tons seems small. But I also want to show you all that the role of small and medium-sized emitters can be relevant in Europe as well. So just at the target level, we know that we will need to, let's say, compensate for part of our residual emissions that we cannot reduce. And this by 2050 is around 400 million tons. This will not be only through technical carbon removals or technical negative emissions, but part of it will have to come from direct air capture, BECCS, and other types of similar types of solutions. And so I just wanted to zoom in a bit on 2 industries that we work with and that are relevant when it comes to creating these negative emissions. The biogas, biomethane industry. Here, this is only, so maybe just take a quick step back. Biogas plants, I think people are aware what it is, and biomethane is when you upgrade the biogas to separate the CO2 from the methane. So that's when you really have that pure CO2 stream. And there are already 1,300 plants in Europe that are running that just emit a pure CO2 stream into the atmosphere. So these are low-hanging fruits. There's really an opportunity there to use them either to complete the sort of capacity that you need or that as a storage company that you need to fill, or in order to develop pilot projects and start developing those. And in general, they are also a big opportunity when it comes to clustering, right? So on their own, each plant can be several hundreds or several thousands tons of CO2 per year. And so quite minimal, but if you group them together, it starts becoming quite an interesting amount. The second sector is the waste to energy. There it's more medium-sized emitters. Some of them are also, one could almost call them large. Um, Generally, so in Europe, it's around 100 million tons a year. Part of it is fossil, around 40%. Part of it is biogenic, 60%. Um, there, there is no sort of pure CO2 stream. Usually, typically it's between 10 and 20% concentration. But still, these plants that are usually between, let's say, 50,000 tons a year and a 500,000 tons a year, together they provide an opportunity for quite a huge amount of negative emissions and fossil capture. Um, Beyond the biomethane and waste to energy, there's also a high number of biomass incineration plants, bioethanol, and other types of fermentation plants that shouldn't be overlooked when we're looking at the CCS network and the CCS infrastructure, so that we also include them and create a network. And like I mentioned before, talking about the CO2 transport network, the CO2 storage network, it needs to be inclusive and it needs to be flexible and it needs to be able to also accept the CO2 from this type of emitters. Now, over the last 2 years, we've been exchanging with quite a number of storage companies, and I think it's been incredibly insightful. I think we face a similar issue on both sides, which is there are a lot of potential projects for storage, but few that are ready to start discussing commercial agreement. And there are a lot of potential projects on the emitter side, but few that are really willing to commit to delivering CO2. So I think bringing those together and starting to have concrete projects, even at small scale, is really what we've been trying to do over the last 2 years, and wanted to share a couple of learnings from that exercise. So the first one is the small and medium-sized emitters are generally not very attractive for a storage company because they will not be sufficient, basically, to fill the capacity you need in order to take a final investment decision. Um, In addition, the infrastructure generally to receive the CO2 is not really built with or planned with the idea of receiving CO2 via other means of transport, but pipeline and bulk CO2 shipping. Of course, this is not all the CO2 storage sites that are out there, and some of them have also included these options, but I think this is something that we've seen quite a bit. Also, the negotiation power. I think this is very hard. A lot of these, if we talk biomethane plants, some of them are farmer cooperatives, others are local utilities. They will not have the negotiation power to discuss sort of the terms and conditions with a large oil and gas company. And generally, they will be imposed the same conditions as a large emitter, which creates quite a bit of issues on their end. And the last point, similar, is the guarantee requirements. Maybe some of you have seen the Stenlille auction that was published last year, which required companies to put up a 25% guarantee unless they had a triple B credit rating. You talk to a farmer cooperative, they don't know what a triple B credit rating is, and they do not have the backing of a big company, and even the municipality or utility that's owned by a municipality, they don't have that kind of credentials, and they don't have access to those guarantee opportunities. So all these kind of create a bit of a barrier for these emitters to actually get access to the CO2, although they would be ready, and they are going to be ready in 2026. Some could be ready already in 2025, but there is nowhere to store. So I just wanted to give a couple of ideas of, how we could, moving forward, also be a bit more inclusive and think about having all those emitters as part also of the discussion around the CO2 transport and storage networks. So in terms of attractivity, I think the Northern Lights project is quite positive because they forced, as part of the subsidy that they received from the government, they were forced to be very inclusive when it came to who they negotiate with. So they have to give a chance to everyone to get access to the CO2 storage. And I think this should be part of any governmental support in general for the CO2 storage, is that there is a inclusivity clause which enforces this. And in addition, they can promote, I think we talked also about local benefits, and I think promoting also the capture of local emissions close to the storage sites is also a lot more interesting than for the local population and local economy, than if you're only bringing CO2 from large industrial sites from other countries or from other regions. Um, in addition, just from a purely, capacity point of view, these are also very useful to kind of fill in the gaps, right? Um, so on the infrastructure itself, I think it's important that the storage sites plan for offloading infrastructure that can accommodate multiple delivery forms. And they can also act as an aggregator of volumes, right? There are a couple of projects that are doing this. So at the Port of Rotterdam or Port of Antwerp, they're trying to act as these CO2 hubs. But there, the storage companies can also play that role in order to aggregate smaller and medium-sized volumes at different nodes within the continent. When it comes to negotiation, I think in general, transparency, it's always nicely said, and I think it's always promoted. But I think there it's important that standard terms and conditions um, are established, but specifically for these type of emitters. You cannot apply the same requirements to a company that's delivering 1 million tons than to a company that's delivering 10,000 or 20,000 tons. Another idea could be to enable a kind of joint negotiation with a group of small and medium-sized emitters to agree on common terms and conditions. And the final point is on the guarantee requirements, which really have to be adjusted, and basically to be more aligned with the actual link, or what are the requirements, or how those small and medium-sized emitters actually influence the final investment decision of the storage sites and the financial sort of risk associated to it. So I will leave you with a part of the EU carbon management strategy document, which says Europe needs non-discriminatory, open access, transparent, multimodal, cross-border CO2 transport and storage infrastructure. And I think that more or less says it all. Thank you.